That is a sharp knife. And I have made a lot of videos about using sharp knives, and I've gotten a lot of comments saying, hey Roger, how do you sharpen your knives? And the secret is, I give my knife to my brother and he sharpens it. So we are going to get into the secrets of how to sharpen a knife. Not too deep, just enough so you can make it workable, so you can skin a deer, so you can fillet a fish, so you can do what you need to do with a sharp knife and not keep pushing through those dull knife problems. So Russell and I talked it through, and we kind of think there's basically two things in this knife, two methods in the knife sharpening world. And the first one really is just maintaining your edge, keeping your knife sharp, which is different than you just kind of got a big mess in your knife and now you're fixing it up. I think really step one, when you're keeping your knife sharp, you'll start feeling that it's not cutting right or it's getting caught up. Or you can do this paper test that we started out with. This actually, if you do it slowly and feel, ooh, it just caught up. That means there's probably a burr or something. You may have hit a bone or a rock or something with the blade, and that it's not going to cut as smoothly after that. Sometimes it's very obvious that it's dull because it's straight up dull. But what we're looking for here, I kind of made this. This is kind of an example of what the top of your blade looks like. And every blade that's made for a different purpose has a slightly different angle here. What's that angle called, Russ?
Bevel.
The bevel of the blade. My father made this knife. This is a heavy-duty knife. Very, very tough. And the bevel is quite steep on this knife, which protects it. It's extremely strong, and it's not, because the metal gets so thick so fast, it's going to stay it's not going to break very easily. These knives that we use so much are quite thin, and they have a small bevel. You have to understand the bevel in order to keep the edge going. And what you'll see Russell's doing here, he's taking a knife that he did the paper test, maybe he looked down at, this is another great thing in a good light, if you look down the blade and you see a little bit of light popping back up. I'm sure that's not going to show up in the video here, but you will, when you look, you'll see light popping up, or you'll see a whole area of kind of shininess. That means, and this happens a lot, glass cutting boards. I don't even want to talk about glass cutting boards because you're just taking this beautifully sharpened knife and bonking it into a hard surface until you got this. Now when you've got that, you're going to see light there. If it comes up to a perfect edge, you're not. Okay, enough about that. How do you sharpen it? Now Russell likes to start, let's say the knife is, like we call this wood dull if you're a carver. It hasn't gotten really dull though, it's just that you've carved so much wood that you've kind of worn out the top little bit of that edge. And that's what Russell's working on here. He's just restarting that edge. And he's holding, and this, I think there's no other way to learn this but practice. But he is doing his very best to hold that blade at the bevel of the blade was made at. So give me a second here, Russ. Let me show this. If Russell was holding that blade like this and dragging, he's not sharpening the end of the blade at all. He's just like changing the bevel, or he's just rubbing on the back here. If he's holding the blade like this and sharpening, he's cutting off. Like if you think you're truly cutting, he's cutting the blade crooked like this. And now, oh dear, it's lopsided. Now I got to go to the other side. Then you end up cutting the blade crooked again. And now you've got a bevel and another bevel. And we don't want that. So what Russell's very, very good at is looking at the blade to know where that bevel is. And by feel, dragging that blade down on the bevel of the blade. So that mostly it's the leading, well, it's not the leading edge. You'd say, when you say it's the entire bevel, it's like this. The entire bevel is riding on that diamond. We didn't talk about the diamond yet. This is, and I'm going to have an Amazon link. Everything you see here, I'll put links for it down below. This is a pretty handy little device. This is a diamond sharpening what is it? It's a diamond sharpening device, anyways, that has 3 different grits. Has 150, that is harsh sandpaper. It has 325, that's pretty smooth, and it has 1200, which is almost like glass. So this blade, since it was only just wood dull to start with, we're not going to screw it up with the 150. We're going to start at the 325 and go down from there. So Russell's hit it a few times at that 325 holding the bevel. Now he's going to do a couple finishing runs on the 1200, holding that thing as good as possible. And there's only so much you can do. So that's diamond encrusted into steel. So little bits of diamond, which is harder than any of the steel blades we're putting on it. That's causing some abrasion and taking a little bit of meat away from that blade. And this is what you do. You drag backwards.
Yeah, I always like to drag it towards me, yeah.
And the idea there makes a lot of sense if you think about it. As you're dragging backwards, you are following the bevel. The bevel's almost leading you, and you have no chance of actually ruining the tip of the blade. If you were pushing in, you'd likely try to roll it, and as you roll it, you're gonna roll off the top of that blade. So as he's dragging backwards or pulling away, he's finalizing that edge. That's about as close. Obviously, how long would you actually normally be? You'd be a few minutes on that, right?
Yeah, depending on dullness.
And you would check it a few times as you go. You'd be looking at it to see if the blade looks like it still has those kind of silvery spots, because that's where it's shining, or doing that paper test and seeing, oh man, every time as I'm dragging through a piece of paper, it catches. That one just caught. It caught right there, and I'm sure if we looked at this thing up close, we'd see there's a little bit of a nick. So we'd be reducing those nicks and everything. Now what Russell's doing here is using a leather strop that's impregnated. I don't want to lose my fingers. What is this wonderful stuff called, Russ?
It's stropping paste.
Stropping paste, not to be confused with toothpaste. But the stropping paste actually has a fine medium of something that causes a fair amount of friction. Once that's impregnated into the leather, we're dragging that medium through the leather, and we're not changing the shape of the blade anymore. All we're doing now is micromanaging that little tiny bit of the finished edge. Because it's that contact, that little end is where all the magic happens. And what Russell is doing here, as if he's still on that diamond sharpening stone, he is just pushing against the leather, holding the bevel the whole time. You're holding the bevel and getting that final edge on there. Now, for those who are intimidated by just doing this Freddy freehand. I mean, Russell's done this for 35 years. He's got a feel for it, and he knows he can look with his eyes and see bevels and be able to follow those bevels. They've made training wheels for this. This device here actually allows you to set different bevels on your blade. The angle here varies. There's 6 different options here. This is a honing stone here on a little bit of a wire, and you would set this here and actually drag back and forth about 8,000 times, or until carpal tunnel has killed you, and that will set whatever bevel you want. Maybe you wanted to change the bevel of your blade, you could do that here, and you could do it quite precisely. This is, there's a lot of things that are sold because they're neat. I think this is a little bit closer to that. It's not that often that it's that important that you're within a certain degree of bevel, and really, it's not that big of a learning curve to get substantially functional at sharpening a blade in that freehand method that Russell's perfected here. So that is sharpening a blade that is in decent shape. I also want to talk about sharpening a blade that needs some serious help. So, if you handle your knife well, all you have to do is those stages. If the knife has a broken tip on it, if it's got a giant notch in it, then you kind of have to do some serious restorative work before you can get a nice finished edge on it. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So, I'll start off. It's very common. This knife was, I think it was actually stuck into a piece of wood and then it snapped off. And this knife earlier this morning was broke off right even, so it had a little extra screwdriver. If you use it as a screwdriver, you do that too. And I actually took this one down onto a carbide wheel, an actual grinder, and I ground that tip. Now that's not as simple as it sounds, because this is a thin piece of metal. You put it against a fast spinning grinding wheel and you're going to turn it red hot. Ooh, that looks like fun, except now you have changed the temper of the steel and you've made a soft spot in that knife and you basically ruined it. So you want to be touching it to a grinder and dipping it in cold water, touching it, dipping it in cold water. So you're trying to keep it from ever heating up as you change that shape up there. If you let it heat up, you've ruined it. The other thing you're going to find a lot of times, for whatever reason, maybe instead of doing nice cutting motions, you start a little hacking motion, or you got a little into a bone and you get a nick in the blade. And that is a giant pain. Like the blade won't work as well because you all of a sudden have one random serration in there. How do you get that out? You may, depending on the type of knife, you may work that out on a grinding wheel, or another way is with a standard metal file. And you can, depending on the knife, again, you could put this thing in a vise and you could work the file against the blade. But especially on a lot of hand knives, the best way to go is actually on the blade itself, working the blade as if the file was a sharpening stone. Now, what's the right grain here, Russell, on the blade? I want to be.
You want to be pulling the blade towards your handle.
I want to be pulling the blade toward the handle. The reason that is a file actually has teeth, and those teeth have a pitch on them that's pitching forward. So if I'm pulling against that, I'm actually sharpening. If I'm pushing into that, I'm not doing anything. I'm riding over it. So I'm going to be pulling against that, and I can work with a file. A file is just so much more aggressive. I can work the shape much more quickly. Now I may, now that I've gotten this thing to look like a knife again and gotten that notch out, I may now be able to work again with this tool. And the beauty of this guy, for the finishing, we only use 2 of these sides. When things get serious, it has a 150 grit side, and you can eat some metal with that thing. So what you would do there, once you get it close to the shape you want, you're going to set your pitch. You may be able to set a new pitch on that blade and start working against that pitch and making that shape again, and then working it down and going right back through. Now we're back to just a nice finishing blade, and that's how we keep our knives sharp for all the work that we do. I would thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see these knives in action, if you'd like to see the things that we catch in order to cut up with our knives, please check out all the videos on our channel, and please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.